The cowboy begged for milk for his child. She fed the baby and gave him way more than that. He stood on her porch at dusk, holding a starving child and asking only for milk. She took the baby without a word, but the way she looked at him said she saw more than hunger. Folks warned that helping a man like him would invite trouble. What happens when one act of mercy is more dangerous than turning him away? The screen door creaked as it closed behind her, the sound sharp in the quiet evening. The child in her arms stirred weakly, a dry whimper escaping its lips, too tired to cry. She rested her hand against its cheek and felt a fever burning through thin skin. Behind her, still standing outside like a man waiting on judgment, the cowboy remained on the porch, hat held against his chest, boots rooted to the dust. Inside, the small kitchen was dim, lit only by the last sliver of orange light slipping through the window. She moved with quiet purpose, striking flint to oil and bringing a weak flame to life in the lamp. It cast a glow that softened nothing. The walls, the table, even the floorboards looked worn to the bone. "You got any milk left?" he asked, voice low, rough. It wasn't a demand. It was closer to a confession. She didn't answer. Instead, she dipped a cloth in warm water and pressed it gently against the child's mouth. The baby's lips twitched, trying to drink what little moisture it could. That was the moment of care, the one that always comes before the trouble. Outside, hoofsteps broke the stillness. Slow, controlled, the kind that didn't rush, because it didn't have to. She glanced toward the window without turning her head. A figure on horseback paused near the well. The late sun glinted off something metal at his side, a badge. The cowboy stiffened but didn't move. His eyes stayed down, shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, as if looking too directly would draw danger closer. She held the child tighter, feeling the frail heartbeat flutter against her arm. The rider at the well removed his hat, as though paying respect to no one in particular, just a habit of men who ask polite questions with legal weight behind them. The cowboy spoke again, barely more than breath. "If he asked, you never saw me." The lamp hissed. The child's breath fluttered like a moth against her wrist. She warmed a tin cup, added a curl of butter, and thinned the milk with water. The cowboy watched the door, not the baby. He stood as if the boards themselves might give him away. "Hold him steady," she said. His hands trembled. "I'm steady." "You're not." He exhaled, and the tremor eased. She tipped the cup. The baby took a few slow swallows, then coughed. She paused, waited, tried again, slower this time, letting hunger find its rhythm. "You ran hard," she said. "I walked where I could. You were followed. For a time. Why?" His eyes stayed down. "Paper. What kind of paper?" "Debt. And something worse." She didn't press. The baby settled, mouth seeking more. She shifted, lifted her shawl, and turned slightly away. The baby rooted, and she made a quiet choice she had not made since her own loss. The cowboy looked away in sudden shame, hat pressed to his chest, the gesture as old as guilt. "I won't look," he said. "See that you don't." Outside, the slow horse at the well took water. Spurs chimed, deliberate and light. The rider spoke to the quiet air the way lawmen did when they wanted houses to listen. "Evening," he called. "Anyone home?" She ignored him, counting the child's swallows. 1, 2, 3. A small sigh against her skin like a prayer answered late. She adjusted the shawl, kept the lamp low. The cowboy whispered, "If he knows I'm here." "He doesn't," she said. "He will. Not if you keep breathing like a man, not a fugitive." He tried a breath. It rattled. He tried again. Outside, the lawman dismounted. Leather creaked. A paper snapped open. She moved to the basin, rinsed the cup. The gesture was nothing and everything. It meant ordinary evening chores, not harboring danger. It meant normal life still lived here. The lawman's knuckles tapped the post. "Ma'am, just checking on folks. Seen a rider pass north." She set the cup upside down. Water dripped a soft, steady beat. She let it speak first. "Evening," she called, not opening the door. "I've seen the heat. I've seen dust. No rider." A pause. Then the courteous tone again, the kind that carried weight. "There's a notice," he said. "County wants him found." "What for?" "Debt beyond grace. Foreclosure. Child in peril, too." Her shoulders tightened. "Paper says the man took a child," he added. "Claims of neglect." The cowboy's jaw locked. A noose of silence drew tight between them. "Who made the claim?" she asked. "Kin and a creditor. Makes a loud pair." The baby stirred, then settled. She breathed through the ache in her ribs and let her voice flatten. "You trust creditors where babies are concerned. Law trusts the seal on the paper. Law forgets how paper gets ink." He let that hang. Then the polite voice again. "If you see a man with a child, you send word. I'll leave notice." She waited. "I'll leave it anyway," he said, as if reading her silence. "Door will hold it." Bootsteps crossed the porch. Her folded sheet slid beneath the crack with a soft scrape. The lawman hesitated, as though listening for truth with his ear to the wood. "Evening to you," he said at last. Spurs turned. Leather creaked. Hooves stepped off slow. They listened until the sound thinned to wind. The cowboy finally spoke. "He'll be back." "He will," she said. "I can't pay what I owe." "I guessed. I can't give the child back." "Then don't." His head snapped up. "You don't know what you're saying. I know what hunger does to a child. It's not just hunger." "What else?" He swallowed. Words scraped their way out. "Her mother's gone," he said. "Died 3 weeks past. The creditor came 2 days later. Called the debt, called me unfit. Because you're poor. Because I'm behind. Same thing on paper." He glanced toward the door. "If that badge gets a judge's ear, the child is theirs. Not if the child is fed. Not if someone swears she's safe. Who swears? I do." He stared at her like she'd offered him a map out of a desert. "You'd lie," he asked. "I'd tell the truth I see in this room." He lowered his voice. "There's more you don't know. Tell it. They say I struck the creditor. Did you?" I moved his hand off the crib. "Did he fall?" "He stumbled." "Did he bleed?" "He bled easy." "Then the paper will call it assault." "It already does." She dried the cup with steady hands. Then she unfolded the notice and read by lamplight. The seal glinted like a small, cold moon. Words named him debtor, danger, deserter of obligations. Words didn't name grief. "They'll come with a writ," she said. "Polite, then harder." He nodded. "I have a plan," she added. He didn't breathe. "You leave the horse," she said. "It ties you to the road. You cut across the bluff by the cottonwoods. The creek hides tracks until dawn. You circle to the old smokehouse, doors broken on the back. You wait there. And the child? She stays with me." His whole body flinched. "No." "Listen," she said, quiet but firm. "The paper hunts you." "It does not hunt me. With the child here, I can meet the law barefaced. I can say she's fed, warm and watched. I can say I found her on my step. They'll search, but not like they would with you under my roof." The child gave a small hiccup, milk drowsy and heavy. He reached for her, then pulled back as if his own hands were dangerous. "I can't leave her," he whispered. "You can, if you mean to keep her." He shut his eyes. The weight of that truth bent his shoulders. "You're sure?" he asked. "No one is sure out here," she said. "But the creek runs cold, and the smokehouse stands. That's enough sure for one night." He looked at the door, then at the child. His voice thinned. "If they press you," he said, "if they threaten, they won't be the first. I owe you more than milk. You owe me a chance to keep that child breathing." He nodded once, like a vow sealed without words. He set his hat on the table, then took it back, uncertain even how to leave gratitude on wood. "What do I call you?" he asked, "if I must speak your name?" "You don't," she said. "Not here." He stood very still. Then he moved to the corner and unlaced his boots so they wouldn't thump on the porch. He wrapped the child in her shawl's edge and pressed his lips to the downy hair. The kiss stayed there a breath longer than pride allowed. "Go," she whispered. He went. The door sighed. The night swallowed his outline. She held the child, listened for the creak she could not see, and set the notice on the table. The ink bled slightly where a drop of milk had fallen. She watched it spread like a slow bruise. Hoofbeats returned, not from the road, from the yard. A lantern flared outside the back window, close enough to burn a stripe of light across the floorboards. A voice she hadn't heard yet spoke from the dark, calm and official. Samantha, it said, "Open up, please, we have a second paper." She didn't move to the door. The child stirred. Heat still pulsed through tiny skin. She wet the cloth again. That was the care. Then came the pressure. "Ma'am," the voice repeated, "open up, second paper." She raised her chin. "Hold your lantern back." A pause. The light eased away from the window. "Who stands there?" she asked. "Deputy," he said. "With a witness." "What witness?" "A man with a ledger." She glanced at the notice on the table. The seal gleamed. Ink held its shape. "I have a sleeping child," she said. "Speak soft. Then open, please. Slide your paper under." Another pause. Leather creaked. Spurs stilled. A second sheet whispered across the floor. "Much obliged," she said, not touching it. "Now read it aloud." He sounded surprised. "Pardon? You read?" "Deputy. So I can hear your authority." He cleared his throat. Words filled the room like cold water. Writ to search for an infant in peril. Writ to seize the debtor if found. Writ to collect assets named in ledger. She let him finish. Then she asked, "Who wrote the ledger?" A new voice cut in. Dry. Pleased. "I did." "State your business," she said. "Account keeper," the man replied. "Sum owed. Interest mounting. Property noted. One child unfit, father." "Children aren't property," she said. "Debt makes everything property," he said. "In practice." She pressed the cloth to the baby's brow. The child's breath rasped thin, her jaw set. "Deputy," she said, "what stands behind that ledger?" "The court stamp," he said. "What stands behind the court?" "The law." "And what stands behind the law?" He hesitated. "Order." "Good," she said. "Then we speak orderly." The witness scoffed. "You stall. I ask clean questions," she said. "Did you see the father strike you?" "A beat. He shoved," the man said. "Hard." "Before or after you reached for the crib?" Silence. Leather whispered as someone shifted. "Answer," she said. "Before," he lied. "You chose that word quick," she said. "Try again." The deputy stepped in. "Ma'am, I will open if I must," she said. "But you will tell me true. The child is fevered. If this is not about truth, it is only about power." The deputy's tone cooled. "We are not here to harm a child." "Then lower your lantern," she said. "You're waking her." The light dimmed another notch. Hoof metal rang faintly in the yard. More horses farther off. She counted the distance in heartbeats. "Witness," she said, "did you reach for the crib?" A sigh, thin and mean. "I steadied the rail," he said, "with your hand inside the crib." He swallowed. "Near enough." The deputy let a breath out. "All right." The baby coughed. Sharp. Dry. She turned for the kettle, keeping her voice steady. "Deputy," she said, "you have two papers. The first asks neighbors to watch. The second asks to search. Neither says you can take a sick child from a woman's arms at night." "We need to see the child," he said. "You can see her from the threshold. That is not sufficient. It is sufficient for a fever." The witness spoke again. "She hides him." "She feeds her," she said. "Learn your pronouns before your interest rates." He huffed. "Open the door." She unlatched the chain, stopped short of opening. "Deputy," she said, "you will stand alone on the threshold, lantern low, hands visible. The witness keeps 10 paces back. Agree now." Boot leather creaked. "Agreed, Hugh," the deputy said, "and you will not step across unless invited." "I will not step across unless invited. And you will speak softly." "I will speak softly." She opened the door a hand's breadth. The deputy's face hovered in lantern haze, young but not green. Tired eyes, weather in the lines. He tipped the brim. "Evening, ma'am." She tilted the child so he could see the flushed cheeks, the slow blink. The deputy's mouth pressed thin. "She needs cool cloths," he said. She has them, she replied. And milk. She has that too. The witness craned for a look. She blocked the gap with her shoulder. Step back, she said. 10 paces, the deputy added. The man stepped back, grumbling. Paper crackled in his hand like a snakeskin. Deputy, she said, does your writ name this house? It names every house. That's not how names work. He almost smiled, then remembered himself. We have to ask about a rider, he said. Tall, coat torn, carrying an infant. A lot of tall men, she said. A lot of torn coats. You've seen one tonight. I've seen night, she said. He breathed through the reply. Anyone else pass here? A lawman, twice. The corner of his mouth twitched. Fair. The child coughed again, harder. She rocked gently. The deputy watched, jaw tight. Let me feel her brow, he said. Your word as a gentleman, she said. Hand only, no step. My word, he said. She extended the child. He leaned, careful, palm brushing the fevered skin. He winced. She runs hot, he said. She was starving, she said. Hunger stokes fever. He nodded once. The witness couldn't stand the quiet. She hides the debtor, the man said. I know it. They always swarm together, the poor. Careful, the deputy said. You're in a woman's doorway. I'm in debt's doorway, the man snapped. Open fully, ma'am. She kept the door narrow. Deputy, she said, your paper gives you the right to look. That's what I aim to do. Then look with your questions, she said. Where would a man run in heat like this? The deputy thought, not the road, the creek. Good, she said. You are a man who truly looks. He straightened, uneasy with the praise. Why are you helping me, ma'am? I am not, she said. I am helping a baby. The witness spat in the dirt. Words, she's hiding him. The deputy studied her eyes. Something softened, then sharpened again. Where's the father? He asked, gentle. Where men go when paper hunts them, she said. Someplace colder than a creditor's heart. Ma'am, he said, that's not a place. It is tonight. He sighed. I could search your house. You could, she said. And wake a child who could seize from fever. He shifted his weight. The law in him tugged. The man in him tugged back. Give me a sign you mean truth, he said. Anything. She lifted the notice on her table. The drop of milk had spread into the county seal, softening its edges. See that? She asked. I tell you the truth. Milk bled your ink. He stared at the stain. He looked at the child. He looked at the witness. 10 minutes, he said. Then I return. With more eyes. Bring water next time, she said. It helps more than eyes. He stepped back. Close your door. She did. The latch clicked. The lamp breathed. She moved to the back window, clutched the sill, and listened. The deputy spoke low to the witness. The witness hissed back, angry and fast. Hooves shifted. Leather murmured. Footsteps approached the porch again. Lighter, wrong rhythm. She froze. A woman's voice spoke through the wood. Calm. Certain. Open up, dear, it said. I'm the midwife. The deputy sent me. She didn't open at once. The child stirred, eyes fluttering. She wet the cloth again. That was the care. Then she faced the door. Who sent you? She asked. The deputy, the woman said. He said the child burns. What's in your bag? Linens, willow bark, a cool stone. Show me the stone. A pause, a rustle. In my hand, the woman said. Smooth. River-worn. Hold it to the window. A grey oval rose in the lantern wash. Not glowing. Not trick. And willow? She asked. Tied with string, the woman said. Bitter as truth. The child coughed, harsh. She felt the ribs shiver beneath her palm. Deputy, she called through the door. You still there? His voice came faintly. I'm here. You sent her? I did, he said. She's the midwife. Best for 40 miles. Witness? She asked. Are you there? A sour breath answered. I see her. She works for coin, not pity. Good, she said. Pity spoils medicine. She slid the chain free an inch. Stopped. Midwife, she said. What's your fee? $2, the woman said. Or bread if you're bread rich. What if I pay with risk? She asked. Risk buys nothing, the woman said. But I'll look for free. She opened the door a hand's width. The midwife stood small and square, shawl pinned tight, eyes clear, hands clean. The deputy waited by the well. The witness hovered, counting ears like coins. "Lantern low," she said. The midwife lowered it. "May I step in?" "1 foot," she said. "Not 2. "That's a surgeon's joke," the woman said. "I don't laugh easy," she said. They stood close in the doorway. The midwife reached gently. "May I touch her brow?" "1 hand," she said. "No paper." "No paper," the woman said. Cool fingers rested on the child's skin. The midwife listened with her palm. Then she turned the child's face toward the lamplight, studying lips, breath, eyelids. "Say it plain," she said. "Fever holds," the midwife said. "Hunger made it worse. Thirst keeps it lit." "Is it breaking?" "It will, with rest," the woman said. "And milk, and blessed quiet." "Quiet is costly tonight," she said. The midwife looked up. "I hear spurs," she said. "You hear interest," she said. "It jingles the same." The midwife unwrapped a small bundle. "Willow bark," she said. "Boiled light. Sips only, no more." "How light?" she asked. "A pinch," the woman said. "No more than a letter's tear." "Letter's tears are large," she said. "Then a judge's," the woman said. "Smaller." Despite herself, she almost smiled. Then the witness stamped the porch. "Enough talk," he said. "Search her rooms." The deputy spoke low. 10 minutes yet." "Your mercy costs me money," the witness said. "Your money costs me mercy," the deputy replied. The midwife glanced at the notice on the table. "Who bled the seal?" she asked. "Milk," she said. "Good sign," the woman said. "I trust milk." "Do you trust paper?" she asked. "I trust hands," the midwife said. "And breath, and heat that leaves." The child moaned. The midwife touched the small chest, counting. "Breaths are shallow," she said. "Hold her upright, tap her back." She did. A thin burp escaped. The child's body eased, just a little. "That's the care," the midwife said softly. "Now comes the thing after." "Threat," she said. "Always," the midwife said. The deputy stepped closer to the threshold. "How is the child?" "Hot," the midwife said. "But not in danger if we keep sense." "And the father?" the witness cut in. "Where is he, healer?" The midwife didn't look at him. "I treat the living," she said. "Not paper." "You're all in it together," he hissed. "We are all in hunger together," she said. "Some forget quicker." The deputy turned to the yard. "Back off," he told the witness. "Give her air." The witness grumbled. Boots grinding grit. The sound moved away, not far enough. The midwife leaned nearer, voice small. "You hide him," she whispered. She held the child tighter. "I hold a baby." "The creek runs north," the midwife murmured. "Tracks vanish there." "You know the land," she said. "I birthed half this county," the midwife said. "I know where men run when shame rides them." "Do you tell the law?" she asked. "I tell the truth," the woman said. "And truth is a wild thing. It doesn't fit forms." The child's eyes fluttered again. The midwife brought the river stone from her bag. "Against the neck," she said. "Cools the blood." She set it gently beneath the small jaw. The child sighed, a thin ribbon of sound. "Good," the midwife said. "See, the wave shifts." "Care," she said. "Then a new turn," the midwife said. A second lantern flared near the shed. Another horse snorted. Men's voices, more than 2. The deputy swore under his breath. "Reinforcements," he said. "Foreclosure men." "Not law?" she asked. "Half law," he said, "hired by paper." The witness brightened. "At last." The midwife didn't flinch. "Close your door," she said. "We mix the willow. I speak for a sick bed." She closed the door, set the bar, and moved to the stove. The midwife measured bark as precise as a scribe. "Water," she said. She poured. The kettle hissed. The scent rose, bitter and clean. "Small sips," the midwife said. "Sweeten with a breath of honey." "I have no honey," she said. "Then a prayer," the woman said. "It sweetens slower." She lifted the cup to the child's lips. "Easy," she whispered. "Only wet the mouth." Footsteps gathered on the porch. Heavy, confident. A new fist knocked, hard enough to rattle the lamp glass. "Open for officers of collection." a voice called. "We have authority." "Deputy," she called, "is that your voice?" "No," he said. "It's theirs." "Do you stand with them?" she asked. A long silence. Then, "I stand with the paper," he said, voice dull. She tasted iron in her mouth. "And with the baby?" she asked. Another pause. "I stand with the baby," he said, "as far as I can." "That's 2 roads," she said. "I know," he said. The midwife tied off her bundle. "I can delay," she whispered. "With words they fear." "What words?" she asked. "Quarantine," the woman said. "Fever." "Contagion." "Will they believe?" she asked. "They'll pretend to," the midwife said. "Men who love paper hate sickness." The knock came again, harder. "Open or we open," the collector barked. "Count to 5." The child whimpered. She rocked gently. The midwife set her jaw. "Let me speak," the woman said. "I know they're kind." The bar lifted. She cracked the door. The collectors crowded the step. Badges without oaths. Ledgers without shame. "Back," the midwife snapped. "Fever bed, quarantine." A laugh rose, thin and cruel. "Quarantine is for cattle," one said. "It's for fools like you too," she said. "You want the county sick?" They shifted, not from fear, from disgust at inconvenience. "Show us the child," the leader said. "From the threshold," the midwife said. "No step, no touch. Or I swear on God's clean air I'll fix your name to the next coughing death." The deputy hovered behind them, eyes warning, hands empty. "Let them look," he murmured. She tilted the child again, careful. The leader peered, more bored than moved. "Fine," he said. "She breathes. Now show the rooms." "Not tonight," the midwife said. "Hotbed. You come at dawn, masked, with vinegar cloths." "Mask?" he sneered. "For a debtor's brat?" "For your lungs," she said. "If you plan to keep them," they muttered. The deputy seized the moment. "You heard her," he said. "Come back at dawn. I'll be here." The witness snarled. "Every hour costs." "Then count slower," the midwife said. Boots scraped, lanterns dipped. The porch light shifted as men argued in the yard. The deputy stood between them and the door, not quite a wall, not quite a gate. The midwife closed the door, set the bar again, and let her breath out. "Waves past," she said. "For now." The child's breathing steadied. A sheen of sweat cooled on the small brow. The river stone stayed at the neck like a moon in shade. "You saved a minute," she said. "I buy minutes," the midwife said. "They're cheaper than coffins." The deputy's shadow passed the window. The witness's hiss chased it. Hooves stamped, impatient. The midwife looked at her hands, then at the bag. "There's one more thing," she said. "Not willow. Not stone." "What thing?" she asked. "The baby needs a wet nurse," the midwife said. "A strong one, night and morning, many days." "She has me," she said. "You're thin," the midwife said. "You share grief with your bones." She said nothing. The midwife's eyes searched the room, then settled on the cradle corner. The wood had a scratch that only a woman would notice. "You've held loss," the midwife whispered. "Here, in this room." She stared at the floor. "Say what you came to say." The midwife swallowed. "There is a woman across the bluff, strong milk, quiet mouth, but there's a price." "What price?" she asked. "She belongs to the ledger," the midwife said. "The collector keeps her debt." The room went still. Even the lamp seemed to listen. "You would bring a ledger's woman here?" she asked. "If it saves the child," the midwife said. "She'll come at a sign." "But the sign will call the collector too." "What sign?" she asked. The midwife lifted the river stone, turned it. On the underside, a mark lay scratched, small, precise. The same mark stamped on the notices. "Hold this to your window," the midwife said quietly. "They'll see. She'll come. So will he." She stared at the stone. The child breathed warm against her collarbone. The deputy's voice drifted through the yard, thinner now, almost pleading. The midwife's eyes didn't leave hers. "Choose," she said softly. "Milk without safety, or safety without milk." A boot thumped the porch post. The witness laughed, low and sure. The river stone grew colder in her palm. Someone outside lifted a latch that wasn't hers, a hidden one, near the cellar door. The sound was soft, but not soft enough. A latch lifting, not from the porch, but from beneath the house. The cellar door. The midwife heard it too. Her eyes flicked to the floorboards, then to the child, then to the window. "That ain't the law," she said quietly. She pressed her palm to the table, steady as stone. "Deputy," she called, loud enough for the yard. His answer came from far off, near the horses. "Still here." She didn't look at the midwife. "Someone's at my cellar." No boots moved above. No spurs. Whoever was there didn't carry authority on their heels. The witness hissed outside. "Check the back." She held up a hand to silence the room, though no one spoke. Even the child stilled as if sensing the shift. Another scrape, wood against rusted hinge. The midwife moved to the hearth, lifting a broom like a staff. "Don't swing first," she whispered. "Let them step into the light." "And if it's him?" she asked. "Then don't call him by name," the woman said. "Names hang quicker than debts." The cellar door creaked. A sliver of cold air crawled up through the floorboards, carrying earth smell and fear. Then a hand appeared, fingers hooking the edge to pull it open wider. "Deputy!" she called again, sharper. This time his boots moved. Fast. Gravel scattered. The midwife leaned close. "If it's the father, he came back wrong." The cellar hatch pushed up another inch, then a breath. Low, ragged. She crossed the room in 3 steps, child in one arm, free hand on the iron poker beside the stove. The midwife stayed near the door, poised between help and witness. The deputy reached the back corner of the house. "Who's there?" he barked. Not angry. "Ready?" No answer. Just that breath, drawn slow like someone who hadn't breathed right in hours. The midwife whispered, "If it's him, he's bleeding." "How do you know?" "I've heard that sound under too many floors." The deputy rattled the cellar hook from outside. "Stand clear," he ordered. "I'm lifting it." She didn't move. She held the child tight against her chest, heartbeat matching her own. The floorboards shuddered slightly as he pulled. Light from his lantern spilled through cracks, throwing broken gold across the table. Then the cellar door lifted. A boot appeared first, mud-caked, heel-torn, then a coat sleeve, soaked through with something darker than water. A shoulder followed, shaking. A face turned upward just enough that the lamplight caught the edge of a jaw streaked with dirt and dried blood. It was him. He had come back, but his eyes weren't right. The deputy froze, one hand gripping the cellar edge. "You," he breathed. The cowboy, no hat now, hair matted with creek water, blinked slowly, as if waking. He didn't flinch at the deputy's voice. He didn't reach for the child. He didn't defend himself. He just said one word. "Ledger." The midwife's head snapped toward him. "What about the ledger?" He swallowed. His throat worked like a man forcing down something sharp. "Didn't just name me." The witness, I'm still outside, heard that. Paper crackled in his hand. "What does he mean?" The cowboy's hand fumbled at his coat pocket. He pulled free a second folded notice. Not the one from the deputy, smaller. Sealed in black wax, not county red. He held it up with shaking fingers. "They're not just after the debt," he said. "They put a claim on the child's life." The midwife went still. "What kind of claim?" The cowboy raised his eyes, not to her, not to the deputy, to the baby in her arms. "They want to take her alive," he said, "and sell her, not to a court. To a buyer." The deputy's face drained of color. Outside, hooves shifted again. More riders, more paper, and the cellar door stood open just wide enough for the night, and whoever hunts children, to come through. The latch sound echoed again, faster this time. The cellar door hadn't closed all the way. She moved first, setting the baby in the cradle by the stove, pulling the shawl over its face. The midwife stayed close, hands tight around her bag like it might hold courage. "Who's under there?" the deputy shouted from outside. No answer. The midwife whispered, "If they're here for him, they already know the house." "How?" she asked. "They follow debts like hounds," the woman said, "and debts remember doors." The floor trembled once, twice. The sound of someone climbing. She grabbed the poker again. The child whimpered. A voice floated up, weak, male, familiar. "Don't strike. It's me." She hesitated. "You said you'd wait by the smokehouse." "I tried." They doubled back. Creeks too shallow now. Tracks showed. They're hunting by lanterns. The deputy's boots scraped the porch above them. "You'll bring a war in this yard," he muttered. The cowboy emerged fully from the cellar, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. His shirt stuck to him, dark with river water and blood. The midwife reached for him instinctively. "You're fevered too." He brushed her off. "No time. Listen." He held out the black-sealed paper again. "This mark. They use it to bind people, not just debt. They call it collateral flesh." The midwife's face hardened. "I've seen it. Mine was on a woman once. She disappeared." "They trade them," he said, "ledger to ledger. Children fetch the most." The woman felt cold climb her spine. "You mean they sell the child to clear your debt?" He nodded. "They signed her name before she was born." Outside, voices rose. The collectors, impatient. The deputy barked something she couldn't catch. The midwife lowered her voice. "If the paper carries that seal, the county can't help. It's private law." "So the law stands with the ledger," the woman said. "Till the ink fades?" the midwife said. The cowboy staggered toward the cradle. She stepped between him and the baby. "You'll lead them here," she said. "They're already here." The deputy burst through the door, then, face streaked with sweat and dust. "They've split up," he said. "Two heading for the creek. Two circling the barn. You've got minutes." "Then use them," she said. He hesitated, eyes darting to the cowboy. "You should have stayed gone." "I came for her," the cowboy said, voice cracking. "Not myself," the deputy pointed toward the back. "There's a dry tunnel runs from that cellar to the old root pit, ends near the bluff. You can hide the child." "No," the woman said. "They'll search the ground. I'll keep her here." The midwife snapped. "You'll die here." "Maybe," she said. "But the child won't." The deputy slammed his fist against the doorframe. "You can't fight paper with courage." "Then I'll fight it with silence," she said. "It confuses men who talk too much." For a moment no one spoke. The baby gave a soft sigh. Then the midwife said, "The wet nurse, the one across the bluff. If we light the sign, she'll come. Her debt might bring the collectors running, but she'll feed the child." "Too risky," the cowboy said. "Too late not to risk," she replied. The deputy moved to the window. "Riders by the well," he said. "One has a torch." "Fire?" the woman asked. "Or signal," he said. "Either way, they're not leaving." The midwife pressed the river stone into her hand again. The etched mark gleamed faintly. "This calls her," she whispered. "Hold it to the light." The cowboy shook his head. "That mark burns both ways." "Then maybe they'll all come," the woman said. "Maybe they'll meet each other before they meet us." The deputy stared at her. "You'd draw them all." "I'll draw them to something bigger than a ledger," she said. "A mother with nothing left to lose," the midwife swallowed. "That's not a plan, that's faith. Faith's the only thing that doesn't owe interest," she said. She moved to the window, held the stone high against the lamplight. The scratched mark caught the glow and threw it in a thin beam across the dark yard. Far off, a horse whinnied. A woman's voice shouted, "Horse, urgent, closing fast." The midwife's eyes widened. "That's her." The deputy turned to the cowboy. "So you run now, she might live." The cowboy looked at the child, then at the woman. "And you?" "I'll hold the paper till it burns," she said. Outside, more hooves, more shouting. The sound rolled closer, like thunder over dry land. The deputy drew his revolver but didn't lift it. The midwife gripped her bag. The cowboy braced the cellar door. The woman blew out the lamp, the house folding into dark. Through the open window came the glow of many lanterns, moving fast. Then, from beyond the bluff, another light answered, brighter, closer, and coming straight toward the house. The light from beyond the bluff grew until it painted the yard in a trembling orange glow. It wasn't the steady burn of a lantern. It flickered like a torch held high and moving fast. Horses whined, the collectors shouting for order that didn't come. She held her breath and watched through the slats. The midwife crouched beside the cradle, covering the child's ears. The deputy pressed against the wall near the door, gun drawn but lowered. The cowboy stood half-shadowed, blood dark on his sleeve, waiting for whatever came next. The torchlight reached the well. A figure dismounted, A woman in a tattered cloak, her hair unbound, her hands bare despite the cold. She walked like someone used to carrying weight. One of the collectors stepped forward to stop her. She said something none of them expected. "I came for the baby." The words froze the air. The collectors turned. The deputy swore under his breath. "That's her," the midwife whispered. "The wet nurse." "How do you know?" she asked. "I trained her years ago, before the ledger bought her name." Outside, one of the men laughed. "Then you know the rules, woman. You want the child, pay what's owed." "I paid with everything," the wet nurse said. "Now I collect." The collectors spread out, their lanterns forming a half-circle around her. One raised his gun. The deputy tensed. She turned to the cowboy. "If they shoot her, they'll burn the house next." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Then we go out first." "You can't," the deputy said. "You'll just die sooner." She looked at him, calm. "Then we'll die seen." The midwife tied her shawl tighter. Seen is how stories survive. The door opened before the deputy could stop her. The air outside was thick with dust and heat. She stepped into it, holding the child, wrapped tight in the shawl. Every eye found her. The torchlight carved her face into something more resolute than fear. The lead collector lifted his chin. "That's the debtor's brat." "Wrong," she said. "That's a life. And it's fed." He sneered. "The paper says otherwise." "Then the paper lies." He raised his revolver, aiming not at her but at the cradle visible through the door. The cowboy lunged forward, pulling her aside. The shot cracked the night, splintering wood, glass raining from the window. The child wailed. The deputy fired back once, not to kill but to warn. The report echoed across the bluff. The wet nurse dropped to her knees, arms lifted, shouting over the chaos. "Stop! You want value! You're killing your collateral." The men hesitated. She took the moment, rushing forward toward the porch. The deputy covered her, shouting at the collectors to back down. The cowboy pulled the broken door shut again, breathing hard. The wet nurse stumbled inside, clutching her chest. Her breath came in wheezes. The smell of smoke followed her. "They lit something," she gasped. "Behind the barn." "Fire?" the midwife asked. "Smoke first, then fire," she said. "They mean to flush you out." The cowboy grabbed the bucket from the corner, but the midwife caught his arm. "Not the barn, the bluff grass. They'll burn the way out." The deputy's face hardened. "They'll trap us." "No," the woman said. "They'll try." She laid the child in the wet nurse's arms. The other woman held the baby close, whispering something soft and old, a rhythm of comfort that didn't need translation. The child quieted almost instantly. "Milk?" the woman asked. "Enough for now," the wet nurse said. Outside, the orange light thickened. Smoke slid low under the eaves. The collectors shouted, half panicked by their own fire. The deputy kicked open the back door. "Creek's the only way," he said. "Run while they choke on their own smoke." The cowboy shook his head. "The bluff's burning. You'll never make the bend." "Then we go through the cellar," the woman said. "Out the tunnel." The deputy looked at her like she'd spoken madness. "That pit collapses halfway. Then we crawl." The midwife handed her the riverstone again. "For the path," she said. "It glows just enough." She didn't ask how. She took it. They moved fast, midwife leading, wet nurse behind her with the child, cowboy last, dragging the cellar door shut once they were below. Smoke seeped through the cracks above them. The air turned sharp and hot. The deputy stayed behind at the door, shouting orders to no one and covering their escape. They crawled in darkness, following the faint glimmer of the scratched mark. The tunnel narrowed until even breath scraped the dirt. Behind them, a crash, part of the house giving way. The sound rolled through the earth like thunder. The midwife whispered, "Keep moving." Ahead, a faint chill, night air. She pushed forward, feeling the slope rise under her palms. Then her hand found space, open and cold. She pulled herself up and out into the shadow of the bluff. The wet nurse followed, the child pressed to her chest, alive. The cowboy emerged next, coughing, covered in dust. They looked back. The house glowed faint red through the smoke. The deputy's silhouette stood at the porch, gun in hand, holding the line. Then the roof fell. No one spoke. The wind turned, carrying the fire away from the creek. The midwife stared down at the child. "She lives," she said. The wave turned again. The cowboy's voice was raw, and the man who stood for her. The woman looked toward the fire. "He'll be remembered," she said, "by whoever still believes paper can't own souls." The wet nurse lifted the child's hand, small fingers curling against her skin. "Where do we go now?" The woman looked toward the ridge, where faint dawn already brushed the sky. "North," she said, "where water runs slower and no one counts what it carries." The cowboy glanced back once, at the smoke and what was left of the house, then followed. The fire's light faded behind them, replaced by the thin, uncertain grey of morning. They walked until the sound of hooves no longer chased them. Then the woman stopped, took the river stone from her pocket, and dropped it into the creek. The mark disappeared beneath the current. The baby stirred, half asleep, the fever gone. The wet nurse smiled through tears. "Safe?" she asked. "For now," the woman said, "until paper learns to swim." The creek carried the stone away, turning once in the light before vanishing beneath the reeds. The woman turned north again, the others following close behind. Behind them, smoke curled up into the pale dawn, like the last page of a ledger burning itself clean. They walked until the sun pushed over the horizon, a weak red coin rising out of the dust. The air still smelled of smoke, but the wind had shifted north, carrying the scent away from the burned house. The woman kept her pace slow for the child's sake. Behind her, the cowboy limped, each step a fight against the weight of what he'd left behind. The midwife moved ahead, scanning the trail. "The creek bends east up ahead," she said. "Beyond that, hills thick with juniper. Good cover." The wet nurse adjusted the baby in her arms. "She's hungry again." The woman reached into her satchel. The last of the milk had cooled in the small tin, half spilled during the run. She handed it over without a word. The cowboy spoke after a long silence. "Deputy's gone, isn't he?" The woman didn't answer right away. "He made a choice. He stood for the law. He stood for the child," she said. "Sometimes they look the same, right until the end." No one spoke after that. The sound of water followed them for a while, then faded as the land rose and dried. The baby dozed, her small breath a thread of sound holding them together. By midday, they reached the first rise. From the top, they could see the valley stretching south, a smear of black ash where the house had been. The midwife shaded her eyes. "They'll find the tunnel, but not soon." "How long do we have?" the cowboy asked. "Till they count the dead and start counting debts again," she said. "Paper never sleeps long." The woman looked at him. "We'll move through the canyon tonight. There's an old mission up the ridge, empty for years. Shelter enough to rest." He nodded, but his gaze drifted back toward the smoke. "He had a wife once," he murmured. "The deputy, buried near the border. He said the law made him miss her funeral." The woman didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Silence, she'd learned, could mend what words only tore wider. By evening, the land began to shift again. The grass grew higher, the air cooler. A hawk circled above them, its shadow crossing their path. The baby stirred. The wet nurse smiled faintly. "Strong little heart," she said. "No fever now." "She's safe," the woman said. "For how long?" the midwife asked quietly. The woman looked at the horizon. "As long as people keep choosing to stand." When night fell, they reached the mission. It sat crooked on the slope, its roof half collapsed, but one wall still held. The stone bell tower leaned like an old sentinel watching over the valley. Inside, the air smelled of earth and candle wax long gone cold. The woman set down her pack and brushed the dust from the altar. The midwife laid a blanket near the wall for the child. The cowboy knelt beside the cold hearth and began stacking bits of broken wood. He lit it carefully, his hands steady despite the tremor in them. The fire caught slow, spreading like trust, reluctant but real. For a moment, the space felt almost human again. The wet nurse sat cross-legged with the child, humming a tune that sounded like a prayer without words. The midwife took out her worn kit, checked the baby's color, then leaned back against the wall. The woman sat near the doorway, eyes on the trail below. "They'll come at dawn," she said. "Maybe," the midwife said. "Or maybe they'll wait till someone else signs a new paper." The cowboy looked at her. You think it ever ends? She smiled without warmth. Paper, never, but ink fades. And people forget what they once believed it could buy. He nodded, poking the fire with a stick. Then we keep walking till it fades. The woman turned her head toward him. You don't have to stay. I know, he said, but leaving never fixed anything for me. The wet nurse shifted the baby closer to the fire's glow. She'll need a name soon, she said softly. Not yet, the woman said. Names make noise. We need silence a little longer. The midwife looked up at the cracked wall, tracing the faint outline of an old mural. Angels with worn faces, wings lost to time. Silence doesn't mean peace, she said. No, the woman said, but it means we're still breathing. Outside, a coyote called, distant and lonely. The echo folded into the wind. The cowboy fed another stick to the fire. The woman watched the sparks climb. When she's grown, she'll ask what happened to the place she came from, she said. What do we tell her? Tell her we ran from paper, the midwife said. The cowboy shook his head. Tell her we ran towards something better. The wet nurse smiled, rocking the child gently. Maybe tell her both. The woman nodded, eyes still on the fire. Through the broken roof, stars emerged, sharp, bright, unbothered by the world below. They took turns sleeping, one always watching the road. The baby slept through the night for the first time. When dawn came, the light found them still there, faces turned toward a future that hadn't yet decided what it would be. The woman rose, brushing dust from her skirt. Time to move, she said, before paper catches its breath. They gathered what little they had. The fire burned low, just enough to leave warmth where it had been. Outside, the land was quiet. No riders, no smoke, just wind and the endless road north. She looked once more at the sky and then at the baby, awake now, eyes wide and clear. Let's go, she said, before silence forgets us. They stepped into the pale morning, footprints vanishing behind them in the soft dust. By the second day north, the trail bent into higher country. The land grew wild again, scrub pines giving way to stone, the air thin and sharp. The creek ran beside them, shallow but clear, a thread of silver cutting through the dust. The woman led the way, her steps steady, even when her body swayed from exhaustion. The midwife counted the distance under her breath. Another mile, then rest, she said. The cowboy walked a few paces behind the wet nurse, watching the baby's breathing. Every sound from the trees made him turn, hand hovering near the knife at his belt. Still looking over your shoulder? The midwife asked. He nodded. Smoke doesn't travel this far, but men do. Not all men, she said. Some die where they stand. He didn't reply. His eyes were still on the trees. They reached a small clearing at dusk. The woman stopped there, lowering her satchel. We camp here. The wet nurse sank down with a sigh, cradling the child. She's calm, she said. She knows the danger's past. The woman looked toward the horizon. Danger doesn't pass. It waits its turn. They gathered dry branches, built a small fire that whispered instead of roared. The cowboy cooked what little they had, cornmeal, a scrap of salt meat, water boiled to broth. The midwife mended a torn edge of the shawl while the wet nurse hummed softly to the baby. The rhythm of their survival began to sound like family, though none of them dared say it. When the meal was done, they sat quiet, watching the stars take shape above the ridge. The cowboy broke the silence. You think the ledger still follows? The woman turned the river stone in her hand, the same one she'd dropped in the creek, now found again on the trail that morning. It does, she said. Paper burns. Stone remembers. How'd it come back to you? The midwife asked. It was waiting by the water, she said. Like something that never left. The wet nurse drew closer to the fire. Then maybe it means we're not done. The woman nodded slowly. Maybe it means the debt still breathes. The cowboy spat into the dirt. Let it breathe, as long as it keeps its distance. But the midwife wasn't convinced. Paper doesn't walk on its own, she said. Someone carries it. The baby stirred at her tone, a small whimper escaping before sleep took her again. They watched the fire die low. The woman reached into her satchel, pulling out a folded scrap she hadn't shown before. It was torn from the corner of the black-sealed notice. the part with the wax still clinging to it. "What's that?" the cowboy asked. "The signature," she said. "See the name?" He leaned close, squinting in the firelight. "Can't read it." "That's because it's gone," she said. "Someone scraped it clean." "Why?" "To use again." The wet nurse crossed herself. "Then they'll write another claim." The woman nodded. "On whoever holds the child next." Silence followed. Only the creek moved, whispering through the stones. The midwife spoke at last. "So we keep her where paper can't reach." "And where's that?" the cowboy asked. The midwife looked to the mountains. "Where the law thins out, where they still trade by word, not ink." The woman smiled faintly. "Then we're heading right." They slept in shifts again. When her turn came, the woman sat near the dying fire, the river stone on her knee. She ran her thumb across its mark, wondering whether it was meant to protect or to summon. Sometime before dawn, she heard a sound, soft, rhythmic. Hooves. She rose without waking the others. The sound came from the far end of the clearing, where the trail bent toward the North Pass. A single rider, no torch, no light. She stepped into the shadows and watched. The rider stopped at the edge of the clearing, dismounted and bent over something on the ground. When he straightened, she saw it, a strip of parchment nailed to a tree, sealed with the same black wax. She waited until he rode away, then crossed the clearing. The wax gleamed faintly in the moonlight. She pulled the parchment free. The words were few but sharp as nails. Property reclaimed. Balance pending. Below it, faintly pressed into the paper, was the same seal. Only this time, the edges of the mark had bled into a new shape. Not a coin, not a crest. A small, perfect handprint. She folded the notice once, twice, and slid it into her coat. Then she went back to the fire, sat down beside the sleeping child, and watched the night give way to grey light. When the midwife stirred awake, she saw the look on the woman's face and knew. "They found our trail," she said. The woman nodded. "But not our names." The cowboy lifted his head, voice rough. "Then what do we do?" "We keep walking," she said, "till they run out of ink." She glanced toward the child, whose tiny fingers curled and uncurled, as if clutching something unseen. "Because as long as she breathes," the woman said softly, "their balance will never be settled." The creek moved beside them, steady and unhurried, whispering against the stones like a promise it intended to keep. The mountains rose sharper now, the ridges folding into shadow. Wind hissed between the rocks like breath through broken teeth. The woman walked at the front, the river stone cold in her hand. Behind her, the others followed single file, the cowboy limping but silent, the midwife, eyes scanning the trail, the wet nurse carrying the child close to her heart. They had not spoken of the parchment since dawn. Each of them carried its meaning differently. The woman with quiet defiance, the cowboy with guilt, the midwife with calculation. The wet nurse only held the child tighter, as if her arms were the only law left in the world. By noon they reached a plateau where the road split, one path leading deeper into the mountains, the other descending toward a thin ribbon of smoke in the valley below. The woman stopped, studying both. The cowboy pointed. "There's a settlement down there." The midwife squinted. "Or a camp. Could be collectors. Could be miners. Could be food," the wet nurse said softly. The woman hesitated. "And eyes." Silence followed. The wind made the decision for them, carrying the smell of cooked grain and ash. They went down. The settlement turned out smaller than it looked. 5 shacks, a smithy, and a rough tavern built of planks and patched tin. A handful of men and women watched as they entered, faces blank but curious. Inside the tavern, the air was thick with smoke and stale ale. The woman spoke first. "We need bread. Water. A place to rest." The keeper, a broad man with one clouded eye, nodded toward the counter. "Coin or trade?" "Trade," she said. She opened her satchel, laying down a small silver brooch, the only thing she'd kept from the burned house. The man picked it up, squinting. "County make?" "No county," she said. "Then it's clean," he said, pocketing it. He slid her a loaf of bread and a flask of water. "You passin' through?" "For now." His good eye flicked toward the baby. "You got a quiet one there." She's learning, the woman said. He chuckled. Ain't we all? They ate in silence, the sound of spoons against tin the only rhythm in the room. The cowboy sat near the door, watching every face that turned their way. The midwife counted exits. The wet nurse rocked the child slowly, her song low enough to hide inside the wind. When they were done, the keeper leaned closer to the woman. You want advice? She met his gaze. That depends on who's giving it. Name's Caro. I keep this place because no one else wants it. He tapped the counter with 2 fingers. Word travels uphill slower than fire, but it still travels. There's talk of a bounty, black-sealed, private mark. Says it's for a woman traveling north with a child not her own. The cowboy's hand froze halfway to his cup. The midwife's eyes narrowed. The woman didn't move. How much? Enough to make poor folk curious, he said, but not enough to make them brave. The wet nurse's voice trembled. What if they come here? Caro shrugged. Then I'll tell them I saw you heading east, toward the canyons. Why help us? The cowboy asked. Caro poured himself a drink. Because I once owed the wrong kind of debt. Took me 10 years to pay, and when I did, the man I paid was already dead. The woman nodded. Then you know what kind of people write these ledgers. I do, he said. And I know they don't stop at paper. Before they could answer, the door swung open. A gust of wind brought in 2 men in dusted coats. One carried a saddlebag stamped with the same black seal. The room went still. Caro's hand dropped under the counter. Collectors, he muttered. The taller man spoke. We're looking for travelers. Woman, child, wounded man. Seen them? Caro didn't blink. Ain't seen anyone worth naming. The man's eyes swept the room. Funny thing, your tracks outside say otherwise. The cowboy's jaw tightened. The midwife reached slowly into her apron where she kept a scalpel hidden. The second collector stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from his coat. Warrant of reclamation, he said. Private law. Child fits the description. Girl, about 6 months. Claimed by property mark. The woman stood. Property doesn't breathe. The first collector turned toward her. Some property does, ma'am. Briefly, Caro's hand moved under the counter. You're in my house, he said. You can take your paper outside. The collector smiled thin. Then you'll hang with them. The cowboy moved first. He didn't draw. He just stood between them and the child. You'll have to try. The taller man reached for his holster, but Caro's shotgun spoke before he could. The blast cracked the air, shattering a window, scattering glass and echoes. The collectors dove for cover. Back door, Caro yelled. The woman grabbed the baby, the wet nurse close behind. The midwife threw a jar of lantern oil into the fire. Flames leapt high, filling the room with smoke. They burst through the kitchen, out into the back alley. Horses screamed somewhere beyond the smoke. The cowboy pulled a knife, cutting through a fence post. North! The woman shouted. Keep low! They ran through the tall grass. The baby pressed silent against her chest. Behind them, gunfire cracked once and twice, then faded under the roar of burning timber. When they reached the ridge, the woman turned. The tavern was a red wound against the darkening sky. The midwife gasped. Caro! The woman shook her head. He chose his side. The cowboy touched the stone at her waist. They'll follow again. They always do, she said. Below them, riders gathered in the firelight. 3 this time, maybe 4. One carrying a new parchment with the black seal glowing in the flames. The woman looked at the baby, asleep in her arms. They'll write her name 1,000 times, she whispered, but they'll never spell it right. The wind picked up, scattering ash across the valley. The road ahead narrowed to a line between 2 cliffs. The only way left was forward. They went. The climb into the northern pass began before dawn. The air grew thin, sharp enough to sting their lungs. Ice crusted the rocks where shadows lingered. The woman led the way, her boots scraping against the frozen ground. The others followed close, each step a sound swallowed by the wind. By midday, the mountains folded around them like walls. No road, only memory and instinct. The baby slept wrapped in layers, breath soft against the wet nurse's chest. The cowboy walked behind, his limp worse now. Blood dried black against his trouser seam. The midwife stopped once to look back. No riders, she said, but I can't tell if that's luck or bait. The woman didn't turn. Both, she said. They're learning patience. They pushed on until they found a narrow shelf under a cliff, half sheltered by stone. There they stopped. The woman brushed snow from a flat rock and spread her map, a torn ledger page she'd repurposed for their trail. The cowboy squinted at it. We're close to the divide. Another day, maybe two. If the weather holds, the midwife said, it won't. The wind shifted as if to agree. They lit a small fire behind the rock wall, feeding it slow to keep the smoke thin. The woman took out the folded notice she'd hidden since the valley, the one stamped with the black seal and the handprint. The wet nurse watched her. You still carry it? It carries me, the woman said. You don't bury a curse until you know its root. The cowboy frowned. You said she wasn't yours. She isn't, the woman said quietly. But they wrote her name through mine. The midwife looked up. Meaning? The woman unfolded the notice, smoothing the creases. The handprint, they took it from me, long before she was born. The wet nurse's face paled. Then she's not my child, the woman said. But she bears my mark. That's why they'll never stop. The cowboy stared at her. You were one of them. I was property once, she said. Worked the ledgers, stamped the papers, until I stopped stamping. The fire hissed softly. The midwife spoke after a long pause. And the man who owned your name. He died, she said. But someone bought the rights before the body cooled. That's who hunts us now, the cowboy said. She nodded. He's not a man. He's a desk with a seal. The wind howled through the pass, carrying snow like dust. The fire guttered, then steadied. The wet nurse adjusted the child's wrap. If the paper ties her to you, can we untie it? The woman shook her head. Paper doesn't tear clean, but it can burn. How? The cowboy asked. With a signature that means more, she said. The midwife frowned. There's no ink up here. The woman looked toward the horizon. There's blood. No one answered. The baby whimpered, then quieted again. When night fell, they slept in turns. Near midnight, the cowboy heard something over the wind, a rhythmic clank, metal against rock. He nudged the woman awake. Riders, she whispered. No, he said. Chains. They rose, dousing the fire. The sound grew clearer, dragging, slow, deliberate. The midwife held the child close. The wet nurse pressed against the wall, whispering a prayer through clenched teeth. Out of the dark came a figure on foot, heavy coat, hood low, hands bound by iron links, dragging a length of chain behind him. His boots left black tracks where the frost melted under each step. When he lifted his head, the firelight caught the mark on his throat, the same black seal, branded into flesh. He stopped a few paces away. Don't run, he said. His voice was hoarse, almost kind. They sent me to find you. The cowboy's hand went to his knife. Then you'll wish you hadn't. The chained man raised both hands, palms open. I'm not here to take her. I'm here to end the paper. The woman's eyes narrowed. You expect us to believe that? I wrote the first one, he said, before they learned to sell signatures. The wind lifted, carrying the chain's clatter into the rocks. The woman stepped closer. Then you know whose hand signed this. She held out the notice with the handprint. He looked at it and laughed softly. That's my mistake, he said. The handprint's not a mark of ownership. It's an oath. Oath to what? She asked. To debt, he said. To bind both ends, the debtor and the named. The midwife's voice shook. For you mean the child, and the mother, he finished. One pays for the other's breath. The cowboy moved between them. Then how do we break it? The chained man lifted his gaze toward the firelight. You already started. You walked north. The ink fades with distance. The woman stared. That's not enough. He nodded slowly. Then burn the source. The ledgers are kept in the valley's vault, beneath the courthouse. Burn that, and every claim tied to it dies. She exhaled hard, almost a laugh. You're asking us to walk back into hell. I'm asking you to finish what you began, he said. They'll hunt her until you do. He dropped something in the snow, a single black link from his chain still glowing faintly at the break. When that cools, he said, they'll know I failed. Then he turned and started down the mountain, chains scraping behind him until the sound vanished into the wind. The woman crouched, picking up the link. It was warm, almost pulsing. She closed her hand around it. The cowboy said quietly, "We go back." She nodded. "Not yet, but soon." The child stirred, fingers curling in her sleep. "When she's strong enough to see fire," the woman said, "we'll give it back to them." The midwife looked at her. "That'll kill you." The woman met her eyes. "Maybe, but the dead don't owe." They sat in silence as the snow began to fall, flakes catching on their clothes and vanishing against the heat of their breath. Morning came cold and colorless. The wind had quieted, but the sky looked bruised, heavy with more snow. The woman stood alone at the ridge, the broken chain link in her palm. It no longer glowed. It was just metal now, dead weight, but proof that the stranger's words had been real. Below her, the others stirred the fire back to life. The wet nurse hummed low to the baby. The midwife checked her satchel, counting what herbs and bandages were left. The cowboy walked a few yards off, scanning the slope for movement. When he came back, his voice was flat. "Tracks. One rider, maybe 2 days old." "Collectors?" the midwife asked. "Or the man with chain," he said. "Either way, the trail leads south." The woman turned from the ridge. "Then so do we." The midwife frowned. "We just climbed out of that valley." "The ledgers are there," the woman said. "Every name they own, every claim they've bought and sold. If we leave them standing, the child will never stop running." The cowboy exhaled through his teeth. "You mean to burn the vault?" She nodded. "And the courthouse above it. That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's an ending." The wet nurse looked down at the baby. "And if we die before she's grown?" "Then she'll live without chains," the woman said. Silence spread like frost. Even the fire seemed to shrink from the weight of what she'd said. The midwife broke it. "You'll need more than courage to burn a vault." "I've got the map," the woman said. "I wrote half the records myself." The midwife studied her face. "So this is what you've been carrying." The woman nodded once. "They used my hand, my ink. I made the ledgers live. Now I'll make them die." The cowboy kicked at the snow, his jaw tight. "If we're going back, we do it clean. No heroics, we get in, light it, and vanish." "Vanishing's not the point," she said. "The point is to make it seen." He gave a dry laugh. "You sound like him, the deputy." "I sound like someone who's tired of hiding." The wind shifted, blowing from the south. It carried a faint smell of smoke and something else. Wet ash, the ghost of the fire they'd left behind. The midwife felt it too. "They're burning the trail." "Then we'll follow their smoke," the woman said. They packed what they had left, half a loaf of bread, a few herbs, the tin flask. The wet nurse wrapped the baby tighter and tied the shawl across her shoulders. Before they left, the woman buried the river stone beneath the fire pit. "We walk lighter without old marks," she said. The descent took all day. Snow gave way to mud, mud to dust. The mountains thinned into rolling hills. They stopped once by a stream to rest the horses they'd taken from the collectors weeks before. The cowboy cleaned his knife and stared into the water. "She's strong," he said quietly, watching the child. "She was born in fire," the woman said. "The world's not ready to burn her again." When night came, they camped near a dry ravine. The midwife traced the constellations with a stick in the dirt. "You ever think of what happens after?" she asked. The woman looked at her. "After what?" "After the vault's gone, after the ledgers are ash." The woman thought for a moment. "Then the world gets quiet. And maybe someone else writes a better story." The midwife smiled faintly. "Maybe they write about us. Only if they forget our names," the woman said. The wet nurse lay beside the fire, humming softly. The baby's hand reached up and caught a strand of her hair, holding it like it meant to keep her still. The cowboy looked into the flames. "If we die down there," he said, "what do we leave behind?" "Choice," the woman said. "That's all anyone ever leaves." Before dawn, she woke the others. They moved south again, through ravines and hollow valleys. The air grew warmer, but the silence deepened. No birds, no insects. The world felt paused. At midday, they reached the ridge that overlooked the valley town. The courthouse stood in the center, tall and grey, its bell tower a dark finger against the sun. The woman pointed. That's where they keep it. The vault's beneath. The cowboy stared down. How many guards? Enough to believe they're safe, she said. They watched in silence as wagons moved through the square. A few men in dusted coats carried crates sealed with black wax. The midwife whispered, "They're moving the ledgers." "Then we're on time," the woman said. The cowboy checked his revolver. "What's the plan?" "Walk in, deliver a paper, leave it burning." He raised an eyebrow. "What paper?" She smiled thin. "The last one I'll ever sign." He looked at her for a long time. "You sure?" "I was sure the night I opened my door to a hungry man and a dying child." The wet nurse held the baby close. "And if they take her?" "They won't," the woman said, "because tonight there won't be anything left to claim." The cowboy nodded once. "Then let's finish it." They waited until the sun sank low and the first lanterns lit in the valley. Then they started down, slow and quiet, 4 shadows moving against the dying light. The woman led the way, the broken chain link tucked inside her coat, cold against her heart. By the time they reached the first fence line, the bell in the courthouse tower began to toll. Slow, deliberate, counting the hours left before everything changed. The woman didn't look back. She said only one thing, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Time to pay the debt." They entered the town after midnight. The courthouse rose out of the dark like a tomb, its bell tower black against a sky without stars. The streets were empty, just wind and the rattle of a loose shutter. The woman walked ahead, the others close behind, their steps soundless on the dirt. At the square, the courthouse doors stood open. Lanterns burned inside, too many for an empty building. The cowboy drew his gun but didn't lift it. "They know," he whispered. "They've always known," the woman said. They slipped inside anyway. The main hall smelled of ink and oil. Desks lined the walls, stacked with ledgers bound in black leather. The wet nurse clutched the baby tighter, her eyes flicking toward every shadow. The midwife pressed her palm to the woman's shoulder. "You lead. You know the path." The woman nodded and turned down a side corridor. Each step echoed, small and final. They reached a heavy door bound with iron bands. The woman knelt, tracing the lock's sigil, a familiar mark. Her own handwriting, etched years ago. She looked back at them. "Once we open this," she said, "we don't leave unchanged." The cowboy crouched beside her. "Then open it fast." She pressed the broken chain link into the sigil. It fit perfectly, clicking into place. The door shuddered once, then swung open. The vault breathed dust and cold. Rows of shelves disappeared into the dark, filled with ledgers, boxes, and papers that whispered as if alive. A low hum came from somewhere deep within, the sound of 1,000 debts remembering their names. The woman stepped inside. "Every name in this valley is written here," she said. "Every hand that ever signed for bread, land, or mercy." The wet nurse whispered, "And the children? They're here too, under the pages that list their parents." The midwife struck a match. "Then let's start the fire." The woman caught her hand. "Not yet." She walked to the far wall where one ledger sat apart, bound in red thread. She lifted it carefully, dust rising like ghosts around her. The cover read only one word, root. She opened it. Inside, pages filled with names crossed by seals, hundreds, thousands. Then she saw it, her own name, written twice, once beside the child's, once beside a date that hadn't yet come. The cowboy leaned over her shoulder. "They already wrote your death." She nodded. "They're rarely wrong." The wet nurse's voice cracked. "So we burn it and go." The woman tore the first page free, then another, her fingers shaking. "Not just burn it," she said. "We erase it." She took the quill from the desk, dipped it in the ink pot, and drew a single line through her own name. The hum in the room changed, lower, heavier, like a heartbeat missing a step. The lights flickered. Then a voice echoed from the doorway. That was a mistake. They turned. A man stood framed in the hall, tall, wrapped in a coat that looked more like a robe than clothing. His hands were gloved. The black seal glimmered at his throat. The collector had come himself. He stepped forward slowly, calm as a preacher. "You think ink dies with fire," he said. "But paper remembers." The cowboy raised his gun. "Then let's see how memory handles lead." The collector smiled. "You can't kill a debt, boy. You can only pass it on." The woman stepped between them. "You bound the living to the dead. You turned need into ownership. I turned chaos into order," he said. "Without debt, the world forgets what it owes." "Maybe it should," she said. He looked at the baby. "That one carries more than you ever did. Born under your handprint, bred for the balance. Give her to me, and the rest of you walk free." The midwife hissed, "You'll sell her like the others." He shook his head. "Not sell to preserve. She's the next signature." The woman's voice was steady now. "Then you've never read your own ledgers. They end like all stories do, in ash." She pulled the lantern from the wall and hurled it across the room. The oil splashed, catching instantly. Flame raced along the shelves, swallowing ledgers by the dozen. The collector lunged forward, but the cowboy intercepted him, tackling him into the desk. Papers flew like wings. The midwife grabbed the baby, running for the door. The wet nurse followed, shouting for the others to move. The woman stayed. She tore page after page from the red ledger, throwing them into the fire. "Names don't own people," she said. "People own their names." The collector rose, half his coat burning. "You'll die with them." She smiled through the smoke. "Then they'll have company." He swung his arm, knocking the lantern from her hand. The flame leapt higher, feeding on the oil-soaked floor. The cowboy grabbed her by the arm, dragging her toward the corridor. "It's done!" he shouted. "Not yet," she said, pulling free. She reached back for the ledger, the last page still whole. The collector staggered toward her, coughing, his gloves melting. "You can't erase ink with courage." "No," she said, "but you can drown it." She plunged the ledger into the water trough by the vault door. Steam hissed up, carrying the sound of pages dissolving. The collector screamed, stumbling into the fire. His coat ignited fully, the black seal burning brighter than the flames themselves. The cowboy seized her hand and pulled her into the hall. Together they ran, smoke chasing them like a living thing. They burst through the front doors into the night. The others waited by the fountain, the baby in the midwife's arms. Behind them, the courthouse bell began to toll again. Not by hand, but by heat. Each clang duller, slower, until the tower itself cracked. The fire climbed higher, turning the sky red. The woman fell to her knees, coughing, watching the flames take everything she'd ever written. The cowboy dropped beside her. "It's done," he said. "You burned it all." She looked at him, eyes wet but steady. "No, I just gave it back." The tower collapsed, sending a shower of embers into the square. The wind carried the ash upward, pages curling into the night like dark birds set free. The baby cried once, sharp and alive. The sound cut through the fire's roar. The woman turned to the others. "Go," she said. "North. Don't stop." "What about you?" the midwife asked. "I'll make sure it's finished." The cowboy started to argue, but she shook her head. "Go." He hesitated, then nodded. "You'll find us." "When paper learns to swim," she said, and smiled. They left her there, standing before the burning courthouse, the firelight dancing in her eyes. When the last page turned to ash, she closed her eyes and whispered something no one heard. Maybe a name, maybe just a prayer. Then she walked back into the flames. The fire had burned for 2 days. By the third morning, nothing remained of the courthouse but a skeleton of stone and a bell half buried in ash. Wind carried the last flakes of soot across the hills, scattering the names that had once chained every man, woman, and child in the valley. North of the ruins, the survivors walked again. The woman's absence followed them like another shadow. The cowboy said little, his limp worse, but his back straight. The midwife carried the map she had redrawn from memory. The wet nurse walked in silence, the baby pressed to her chest. They crossed the river at dawn. The water ran black with ash, then cleared the farther north they went. No riders followed, no papers waited at the crossroads. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't smell of smoke. When they reached the high meadow, they stopped. A small cabin stood there, half collapsed but dry inside. The cowboy dropped his pack. "This'll do." The midwife smiled faintly. "For now." They made a fire. The wet nurse warmed milk in a dented tin cup and fed the child, whose eyes opened wide and calm. Outside, wind moved through the grass like waves through shallow water. That night, the midwife asked, "What do we tell her when she's old enough to ask?" The cowboy stared into the flames. "Tell her her mother ended a war." The wet nurse shook her head. "No. Tell her her mother taught the world what mercy costs." The baby made a small sound, neither laugh nor cry, as if she understood. In the morning, they buried what little they'd carried from the fire: the broken chain link, the river stone, and a single scrap of red thread. The midwife whispered a prayer over the hole. The cowboy marked it with a flat stone. Afterward, they walked to the ridge. From there, they could see the whole valley, quiet, empty, reborn, no smoke, no papers, only wind. The midwife turned to the cowboy. "You'll stay?" He nodded. "For a while." "And you?" she asked the wet nurse. "I'll head east," she said. "Find work. Raise her where no one knows our names." The midwife smiled. Then the story begins again. They stood there a long time before parting. The cowboy gave the wet nurse his last silver coin. "For her first word," he said. She took it, closing his hand around hers. "What if it's your name?" He looked at the child, then shook his head. "Hope it's something better." By the time the sun touched the mountains, only the wet nurse and the child remained. She followed the creek until the land leveled and the trees grew thick. When night came, she built a small fire and sat with the baby in her lap. The flames cracked softly, throwing light on their faces. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of rain. She looked down at the child and whispered, "Your mother's debt is gone." The baby reached toward the fire, her tiny fingers glowing red in its reflection. "Everything she touched burned clean," the woman said, "even the paper." Thunder rolled far off, low and slow. The first drops began to fall, hissing against the embers. She covered the child with her shawl and watched as the fire dimmed to a glow. When the rain stopped, the ashes were gone. The world smelled new again. She stood, holding the child close, and started north. Each step left no mark. Behind her, the creek whispered through the reeds, carrying what remained of the old world away. And in the quiet between her footsteps, it almost sounded like a woman's voice, calm, steady, free, saying the same words over and over, the ones that had ended the fire and begun the story again. No one owns what breathes. If this story struck a chord in you, stay a while. Every day, we tell the kind of tales that still carry dust, heart, and truth. Stories of people who stand when the world says kneel, of kindness that costs something, and mercy that burns brighter than fire. If you believe stories can still change the way we see each other, subscribe, share, and keep the flame lit. Because out here, on this long road of debts and redemption, the story doesn't end. It just waits for the next soul brave enough to tell it.